Welcome back, Gophers. Today, I wanted to take a look at some of the things I've been kind of hacking on. I didn't get a live of it because, like, you know how it goes. Sometimes you need to just get in the flow of things. But now that I have something that's not just purely horseplay, I wanted to show you how I've accomplished authorization. That's a challenging subject as opposed to authentication. We've had authentication since the beginning. So the difference, and this is important, authentication is who you are, authorization is what you can do. So the big difference is, let's say there's two users. Should they be able to edit each other's accounts? Probably not. But if you're a super user or there's an admin or something like that, maybe they can edit someone's account. So that's authorization. The other thing is kind of a little bit of tech debt. Uh, the CSS file was getting quite long. Basically, we're at over 1,000 lines already. It's quite a bit, and it was just becoming obnoxious. So I reached for 12 views before. It's been a little while, but SAS. So we actually now can use SAS to create our styles and organize them, all that sort of fun stuff. And since now I had to compile or whatever SAS, whatever term you want to use to turn SAS into regular CSS, I've gone ahead and added uh, sort of an asset pipeline, very rudimentary, but still it works. Where I take all the assets that now no longer have to live in that handlers directory, which is good. Um, Pull them all out, minify them to get rid of white space and just kind of clean them up. Then we compress them. So they get pre-compressed with both Brotli and gzip compressions. We're actually using an alternative, but it's gzip compatible, so that's good. Um, and then we take those assets and move them into the right location, so then we can embed them in our binary and serve them. So that all happens kind of on the fly. Whenever you change any of the assets, it'll automatically kick off uh, recompilation and the entire pipeline of everything. It's pretty snappy. Sometimes when I stream, it chugs a little bit, um, but it's a reasonable amount of time. It's worth it for my needs at least. So without further ado, we're going to jump right in here. I'll show you what we got going on. This is our application. Uh, yes, I kind of changed out the font awesome implementation to use their JavaScript one, partly because I want to probably get a pro subscription or whatever. I'll have to make some configuration for that coming soon. But I noticed, hey, you can bounce stuff. So I just wanted to see what it would look like if when someone wants your attention for a check in, it starts bouncing. So make that go away and we can bring it back just by doing a check in because they want to be re acknowledged. They got unacknowledged. So that's kind of cool. So let's go to the profile. This is my profile. You can see I'm starting to build it out. And this page is really what made me want to go down the asset pipeline. This page made both the asset pipeline and drove the security thing. So edit profile. Okay, right. We can see editing. Now let's open a new private window and we can go to the same page over here. And this way my cookies and stuff aren't there. You'll notice a few things have changed now. We have account. The signed-in version has account. The non-signed-in version has sign-in and register links, and also the edit profile is here. It's not over here. And there's one more change, which if I am logged in, if I go to this fellow's profile, you can see that it says here are some metrics because the idea is I was just testing it out. Um, I want to have something that's for logged in users only. So a logged in user can see this text, here's the metrics or whatever. Um, a anonymous user cannot see that. And the link here for editing the profile is only there if you're allowed to edit your own profile, which is kind of neat. So we're actually able to control those different aspects at a custom level pretty in I think a straightforward way. So, an aside on security stuff. So, authorization is a very tricky subject generally. Uh, my implementation is probably got a ton of edge cases in it that I haven't considered. Uh, it is possibly insecure. I don't know. It appears to work, uh, but if you're going to implement some sort of authorization strategy or auth Z strategy, it's going to have to be based on your business rules. For me, this was good enough. Uh, I feel like this accomplishes the goal, um, and I wanted something super simple. The challenge with a lot of the existing authorization packages that are out there is they're meant to be this really robust thing. They can have rules. They can have very complicated ways to set them up. Maybe they use some external service. Maybe it's a microservice situation where people are checking to see if they're authorized. There's a lot of stuff going on there, and they're made in generic ways, which if you because they're a package meant to be shared with everybody. But in this case, my implementation is not meant to be shared with everybody, so I can take a little more liberties and really tune it to the way that uh, my system and NetControl itself works. With that being said, let's look at that briefly. So let me just make this bigger. Okay, we have on the left here. This is the let's go a little bit bigger. This is the entire implementation. That's not quite fair. The thing that actually makes this thing work. I have start with two interfaces. Actually, let's back up a little bit. Let's go with the thing that actually executes the um, security policy or the figures out if someone can do something. So there was an old Ruby package that I liked back in the Rails days when I did Rails a long, long time ago. That was very simple. I think it was called can or something like that. Uh, and that got me thinking of what's the minimum thing we can do. I need to know, can a given user perform an action on some resource or resources? Do you have any problem with that? Are there any errors with that? So that's exactly what I have here. I have a function on the service, the auth Z service called can. It says, can this account perform some action, that's a string, on zero more resources? There's a bunch of logging here, and we can dive into that a little bit. Um, but that's it, right? And now one other thing that I've decided is that there's never going to be uh, let me rephrase that. There will always be an account. The account may be an anonymous account, but we still have an account uh, object or type to work with. It's the account model just defines an anonymous. It's called model account anonymous, and this way we can use that just as a way to say, hey, is the user logged in or not? Uh, do we know is this an anonymous user? Anything like that? There will probably be a couple other accounts. One will be a system account, and this way I can say, hey, is this a system account? Is this an anonymous account? Um, we can uh, create these low level internal account types that are accounts that are not necessarily possible to exist. So, for example, the account anonymous uh, is actually defined. I can show you that real quick. It has an ID of -1 that cannot be saved to the database. Like it just will not work. The ID must be non-zero. SQLite will it'll complain because you're trying to save an ID negative to the database. Um, and so the same way I can add a bunch of these internal accounts, system level accounts, and give them negative indices, and we can make sure that um, those don't get saved to the database. They just can't. So we'll skip over this resources for a moment, and this is the meat and potatoes of this. Um, If you're a Verber interface, which you'll see in just a moment, basically saying that the resource supports a certain amount of verbs, whatever they are. If you try doing a verb that doesn't exist, then you're not allowed to do it. So, for example, if the user has, if you try to send the verb, I don't know, make a sandwich. If the account doesn't support that, if that's not a valid verb for that resource, you can't do it. Then we go, okay, cool. Now, if the resource is a canner, meaning it has a can function of its own, then we basically say, hey, resource, can this account do this verb? Give us an error or not. So it's opt in. And then if the resource doesn't supply any a can, isn't doesn't implement the canner interface, we just say, hey, okay, you must be authorized. There's no restrictions. I also could go the other way and say i- it's 100% restricted, but in this case, I just since I'm adding it in, I wanted to make it add in. We can very easily uh, just literally right here, this return nil could just say return not authorized, and that turns it into a deny first kind of approach. Um, we don't have to worry about that. Let me show you what a Verber is. Verber is very simple. It has a verbs function that returns a slice of strings of the allowed verb. That's it. That's all it does. Um, and then canner just has a can that takes an account and an action and returns an error. That's kind of it. To opt in, you can see this implemented over here. This is on the account model. Can account do this? I probably could rename this other just to be clear. There's a lot of account here. So basically, hey, we support edit and view on account right now. Uh, if you're anonymous, we say, hey, we can give a reason. Anonymous users cannot edit accounts. If you are trying to edit somebody else's, you can't edit another user's account. Pretty straightforward. So the rules about the permissions of who's allowed to do what is in the model. I looked into putting it somewhere else completely. It just this I felt like made the most sense. We're gonna have validations here already. So we have validations and permissions right here. To me, that goes towards data integrity. So it seemed the easiest place to put it. Plus, this way the um, authorization, the can function here has access to any private, or sorry, not private, unexposed variables and functions and that it would need or might want to use in order to work with the internals of that model. So I felt like it made sense. And in the case of Vue, this was a testing thing. I could say, hey, we can now have a choice. Let's say allow anonymous users to see my view my profile. In which case, I could just return here. If the user's anonymous and the account doesn't allow anonymous views, we return the error. And if it does, then we're can let no error returned. Pretty straightforward there. There's one thing that I glossed over. If we look on the left here, you notice I have a special case for if you don't pass in any resources that you're trying to use. What this allows is almost like a feature flag, um, but I can basically do things like, let me show you the example. I have a default policy defined. Um, any policy is just a string of the verb um, to a function that takes an account and returns an error. It can be a policy. So I create a default policy, view metrics. So that's why view metrics, anonymous users can't view metrics. Cool. Um, I'm thinking I am in the Ham Shack hotline. So I could add it where anonymous users don't see contact me on the Ham Shack hotline, but internal ones do, which is cool. Um, and other ones like feature level things like manage account. So an anonymous user can't manage their account. So I can just say, hey, these are high level kind of policies, and I can have as many of these as I want, and I just merge them all together in the end with a map. Um, and I think I even have a helper here too. Yeah, you can just set when the system starts up, it can set policies, and we can make this more robust. And we could even load a certain policy based on a certain resource or whatever we want. We can do that. We can pull this out of the database. For example, we could pull out this massive policy. We could read some sort of YAML or TOML files, or go really fancy with Lua and all these other fancy things. But we don't need to do that for now. So keeping it simple with just a bunch of statically defined things of some policies, and I can add these in the future if we want to. So that's the core. That's to me, this is the core of uh, my authorization strategy. I also just basically go, hey, if there's no resources, I set a resource, and this basically just uses the policy um, instead. So that kind of falls back to the policy if you don't provide a resource. So it's simple, right? It's a joy to use in some ways. So um, we go ahead. I want to show you on the bottom right here. I made a couple helpers for the views. So one, there's some things are easier to do in straight Go than Temple, especially if you have to assign variables and do a bunch of error handling and stuff. So I will sometimes name a file the same name as the Temple just to show that they basically go together. Um, so have a user can function that essentially gets the current account. If there's no action given, it just short circuits it. This way, if the if it comes in a variable or something like that, I wanted to make that optional. Um, so this way, it's allowed. Um, that I needed that when I was doing some rendering, so that made it easier. Uh, we get the current account. I modified this get account so that it always returns an account, whether or not you're logged in. So we attempt to get an account, and if we can't pull one out of the session, we just give you back the anonymous account. This used to return an error or panic or something like that, and I was always doing all this error checking. But instead of just passing the error along and dealing with it everywhere, by adding this anonymous user, now I'm guaranteed to have an account. So we're going to use that one instead. I still have to do some anonymous checks sometimes, but that becomes more of a permissions and logic issue than error handling to prevent a panic. And I have also taken this account, um, and when you log in, I actually just put the entire account into your session, which is fine. That'll get stored to the database. It gets passed along in contexts and things like that with the session package that I'm using, uh, which I actually quite like. And then we're able to always pull it out, usually, if it's there. If it's not there, we don't get back okay. We get back, it just doesn't work, and um, we're okay. And now we can pass it along. So then we have our in our view, let's take us back to there. Let me put this back up here. Yeah, so user can, and then we get that account. So hey, authorization service can the user of the session perform this given action on whatever resources were provided. So you can see how certain things just drop off as we get additional context or we're in different scope. So um, in the template in Temple now, in our views, we can just say can action on resources because this is always going to be the current user, which we can pull out of the context. So we don't need to ask the view, hey, give us a user, we can collect it. And then if we can do it, just this makes a block essentially, um, show it. And then to make it simpler, and because you can't have multiple like block things going into a in Temple, so I have cannot. So this way, they're the exact reverse of each other. Hey, can the user do this? Show it. Can the user not do this? Show it. Right. So if the user cannot do a certain action, and you'll commonly see them together. And just for giggles, I figured I would. play with see if this concept worked for a feature flag because the config that I'm using already supports feature flags. I already have that. So now we can basically have the same way that we're doing permissions. Very similarly, we can also do feature flags. So now I can say, hey, this feature is for a certain subset of users or something like that. And this really should go out to a service that does this instead rather than just calling config directly. The reason being is, let's say I want to have, there's two approaches here. With I can either use permissions or feature flags or a combination of both. If let's say I choose to add billing plans and I want to make it so that you can have memberships, the feature flag could say disable an entire feature set for this, but I really thinking that may not be the best approach. Really, I should use permissions for that because this user is not permitted to use that feature. Whereas a feature flag is something I might disable site wide. So, for example, let's say I am developing a new logbooks. Right now, we only have nets, and most of the code is going to be the same, but there might be different views or different endpoints and links and stuff that goes to logbooks for a specific user. I can just use a feature flag, and this way in production, I can just disable that feature flag uh, for across the board. Um, or eventually we get to the point where we can say for a specific user uh, or group of users, whatever those make that more robust. But for now, it's disabled site wide. We can disable that entire feature. If we want to make it self-hostable, we may not need users and things like that. We can just disable that completely. We have that capability. It was trivial to add, and it makes things pretty robust. Uh, and then you can see in the profile page where it's actually used, uh, this little bit that I've highlighted. If you can edit the account, show the account link. If you can view metrics, so show some metrics. That's pretty cool. Um, and then, so that's one example. And then navigation, I basically, which I don't know if we talked about this. I don't think we have. Um, so let's do the left, the main nav. You can see an example. Yeah, this is can and cannot. So if you can manage the account, we did this instead of seeing if they're anonymous or not, whatnot. See account, and if they cannot manage the account, we show in the login links. There's another thing I did. I think it was oh that's right. I know where it is. Let's go up here. Just a moment. Uh so navigation is something pretty important. And it ties with permissions. Okay, here we go. If it stops loading. Okay. If you notice here I have page. I made it take something called a menu. I'll show you that in just a moment. And you give it a can action and a can resource. That's going to get past a can. Oh no, hold on one second. Whew, sorry, I had to sneeze. Okay, so basically, in order to see this link, the settings link, which currently goes nowhere, and it has a given icon optionally, they have to be able to perform this action on this resource. The reason that's important is I want to make it so that, um, well, one, like you saw um, in the live yesterday when I did a live chat test, anonymous users can't perform check-ins. Makes sense. I can make it more robust, which I intend to do, where if there's an owner of a net, be it a user or an organization, they can give permissions on their nets if they choose to run a net, that say you have to have the role of a net controller. If you have a net controller role for a given organization, you'll be able to perform the check-ins, which is kind of awesome. Um, or you can, um, we'll say, only managers of the net managers are permitted to add net controllers. So therefore, they're the only ones who can add this access the settings. So we just drop it off the nav. We still have to validate it so that they don't just type in the URL and go and edit for stuff. That would not be great. But why send someone to a page they can't get to? Cool. Um, Now, a menu, this is the little bit of insanity that I went down. Um, a menu is a slice of menu items, and a menu item has a value. That's what we want to display, a URL, where you're going, optionally an icon, and there's all the attributes that go along with that. Some arbitrary attributes if there's more classes or anything that's needed. Um, cool, or HTMX or anything you want to do, you can do that. Um, Section separator. Basically, these are some extra flags of how it gets displayed, and we have our can action, which this probably should be a slice of any, but I think it'll be okay. Um, we have a special helper to find out the current URL. Um, and the idea is that an active uh, class is added if the URL in the menu is the one you have. And this way, CSS can optionally take over and show things. Um, we make sure that if the user can do something, we can actually render the item. So that means we display it. And then a section. This is that's this. I want to be able to say that in the nav bar. Let me actually show you. Do, do, do. There's a section on this side, and there's a section on this side. This section is defined as left. This section is defined as right. So I want to have some menu items go here, and some menu items go here. That's why it has a section. That's it. But it's arbitrary. The UI could be like, I need 4 sections, uh, and if it has a section, it'll get put into the right place. Um, I'm not sure if I ended up doing that in the end. Whatever. I still have to clean this up. Um, we have our upper navigation, which has 2 sets of menu items, so I just did this that way. Bunch of HTML. Yeah, so you can see 4 section left, 4 section right. So I do use it here. Um, I just go through the menu. Did I even use this? I don't think so. This is why it's good. I don't think I used this at all. I think I was playing with that. Um, yeah, so I introduced the section idea instead of this because this is static. So that's that. Um, so you can see, hey, sections are in action here, the left section, right section. We just go ahead and show it all. Um, there's not really anything defined for the right section right now because all we have is um, the account thing. But if I wanted to add anything else, I could add it. We could extend this further to say there's a menu item, and instead of being a link, we can implement something else to do that. Um, and then, so that works. Like that's cool. The same thing I'm able to reuse to make it so that those sliding menus, which I think we discussed, um, I want to be able to have to group them, which I'll show you what that looks like real quick. Exit full screen. Yes. So over here, you see, I don't know if you see this so clearly, but there's a border here, and a border here, and a border here. There's clearly a divider. These are the groups of menus, the sections that I chose. Like you can have multiple menus and they're grouped together. So the groupings. Those groupings are here, all the different multiple menus. Um, and this, of course, says which side of the screen to show it on, um, because this means I can make it arbitrary. I can generate anything I want. It's a reusable component at that point. Um, yeah, we just go through each all the sections. It's pretty just go at this point, pretty much straightforward, I think. Um, oh, and I did fix that the mark. The problem was is this. It's X. It's not X dash mark. It's just X mark. So we have proper close icons now, um, which is cool. And we can make it still might do this. That let's say when you hover over this, it spins or does something fancy just to show you that you're get a little bit of reaction and have a little bit of fun to it. Um, user delights me. So um, I like things reacting to the user. And what did I change? Oh, still playing. And there also, you'll notice there's Gravatar URL. There's a helper that I added that basically means that this picture is actually coming from Gravatar. Uh, it's just a service that I can take an email address, hash it, send it along, and I get back a picture if they have one. This way, I don't have to host all those pictures, and it's unified with whatever other sites they choose to have. Um, and if it doesn't exist, it'll actually generate some random I set it to generate some random looking robot dude. So I thought that was cool. This way everyone has an avatar. And if you want to change it, it doesn't cost anything. All you got to do is go there, give your email address, and they have a magic link just like I have. So it's pretty transparent, or rather, pretty easy to use. So that's my. I think we covered what I wanted to cover. Um, Oh, we want to look at the assets real quick. That should be quick. So that's all the security stuff, which is there right now. Anywhere I want, I can just say, "Hey, can the given user perform the given action on one or more resources?" Um, and I just made it as an aside. You have to have that permission on every resource given there, uh, and that I figure this way instead of because I could see it being, can they do this? If error, no. Can they do this? If error, no. Instead, I just say, can they perform this action across all these guys? So um, it just makes it a little bit more nice to use, pleasant to use, and it also gives us that optional capability. Um, the last fun thing, I just finished this a little bit ago. Yeesh. Let's go back to internal real quick. If you notice, let's see. There's now 3 folders here: assets, JavaScript, and tools, styles. So even though I'm not writing any JavaScript, we still have a couple JavaScript dependencies. There might be there's a couple little shims that I think I have 1 or 2 just to fix, couple little things that there was no way around it, but I'm not writing, real functionality in there. Um, and of course, our styles. Right now, they're all in CSS, but really ease that's just for now because I haven't pulled them all out. All we did is have our main SCSS file pull them in. As things get broken up, I'll be able to add it to there. I can basically create files, organize things how I so choose. However, it makes sense to do, I'll be able to go and do that. The fact that main here and starts with an underscore is an indication to my rudimentary asset pipeline to say this is the entry point or these are the entry points. And so that on the other side of it, I'll end up with a main.css file and the mins and compressed versions. If there was another one called theme underscore theme, it would similar that one would be the one that actually ends up on the other side of the asset pipeline, and the others are considered just components thereof. And I don't want all the components just don't want to spend the time building them or do anything with it. Then the asset pipeline. Oh, hold on one moment. We're gonna just we'll take a quick break. When the boss calls, you answer. So where were we? Yes. Um, so this is our main SAS file, just pulls in the existing stuff. I still need to clean it up, break it into components, deduplicate a bunch of stuff, just to organize it better. I still have a 1,000 line CSS file, um, but we'll be able to clean that up quite a bit, and it'll be much easier to work with. Um, since I am using Mage to do all the building of everything, make sure we're not running right now. So I'm using Mage files, which are um, a way to do build tooling in pure Go. I like it. It works. File build. You can see the build. See how the sausage is made. So this is decidedly not clean, um, but it works for now. I have an asset pipeline target that basically finds every single file in in the views uh, directory that is not a temple or Go file. It's a static file, so it's going to be images, CSS, JavaScript, well, SAS, um, JavaScript. I collect all those things. That's what this gross function is. A lot of this is very messy. Um, then we shell out to a SAS preprocessor and hand it every single SAS file that we care about, which are the ones prefixed with underscore. Um, I run a tool called Minify, which does does exactly what it says. It minifies those CSS and JS files into the smallest they can be. If in this stage, if it's a uh, picture, so it's a PNG, JPEG, GIF, SVG, something like that, um, we're not going to minify them. There are tools that can do that. If I have more than just like one or two, I'll look into that. There are ones I have already only a couple bytes, so that's fine. Um, Lastly, we do all our compression. So we shell out to Broadly and something called Zopfli. Uh, I don't, whatever. It's gzip. It spits out a gzip file on the other side. It's just supposedly better compression. So I went with that. Then the last thing we do is we copy all the files in our temp directory that we care about and shove them back into the handler's internal handler static, and we're done. Um, Actually, don't need that. Cool. Or that. I just deleted some nonsense testing stuff, uh, and that would let us build. And you can see what this looks like. Uh, Generate assets. Oops, it's Mage. So I added a better logging. So wow, that finished really fast. Uh, so yeah, the asset pipeline. I basically keep track of now the times that everything takes. I thought that was nice. It shows all the steps that it took and their status. If something has an error, um, which I can, oops, I still have it open. During my testing, I added a stop right here um, part of my pipeline. You'll see that in action here. So you can see now that it stopped the presses, and it just didn't copy the assets. So you'd actually show you what step it failed on. Uh, I thought that was fun. And I basically did the same thing. I went back through my uh, build code and added that everywhere just to make it clearer what's going on. Um, so my code already supports the build code already supports multiple commands. I only have one right now. Um, Then we make sure our target directories exist. They all do, so they get check marks. If they didn't exist, it would have a plus, and if there's an error, it would just be an open little paren there, and then it would obviously stop the whole the whole flow. Um, Started doing our dependency management, so let's just go mod tidy, making sure things are good there. That'll pull down any new dependencies that we have, remove ones we don't use. Then I did make it so now generating the temple components and the pipeline is to go in parallel, which did help speed a little bit. So you can see they both uh, generate temple components is starting, asset pipeline is starting, and then they're going to finish probably in the order that they're started. They don't always, but most of the time they do. And here we go. All the code that should get generated is here. All the asset pipeline stuff is displayed as well in the same style. I actually borrowed this style from the output of Temple. I thought it was nice enough. I just figured, you know what, let's add it everywhere, make it consistent. Uh, we did our code generation, so that's SQL C compilation and embedding of the bind of all of the files. Uh, all of our static files get embedded into the binary or made available to be embedded at this point, or all of our stringers and everything else that we got to do. Code generation happens then lastly we build the whole thing, and we see that it took 13 seconds to build. The speed on that right now is just because I'm um, doing a live. Normally it's probably half that or a third of that, which is why sometimes when I'm doing a lot of UI stuff or things that where I have a lot of compilation has to happen again and again, I may not always do a stream. It does slow it down at least double or triple. Um, it's a few times slower. Um, do I have any more history? No, I cleared it out, which is fine. And then when we combine that with Air, I made it so that it no longer gets updated. It doesn't trigger a recompile when the static files change. It will do that when the it will recompile things if any of my SAS or or JavaScript files change, or if I drop a new image, something in there, it'll recompile everything, which is cool. So that's all taken care of. Um, and I think I'll have to check. I think I might need to add SCSS to here as well. I haven't edited any of those files yet, so we'll see how that goes. Um, so that's basically it. So now with that in place, when I run air, that's what's doing that reloading. And then if I don't know, service authorization, and we save it, you'll be able to see that it detected that authorization go has changed. This is what's actually doing that recompile that I'm always waiting on, um, when we're making a lot of changes. And then it rebuilds the whole thing, and then it starts it running again. So basically, this part, and that's why I wanted to have um, the detailed output of the build so that I can see exactly what's going on in a way that's looks nice to me. And that's kind of what matters. If it looks nice to me, I want to have a good developer experience. I don't want to hate doing it. Um, cool. So let's wrap this up. So the asset pipeline is done. That's something off on my to-do list. That's done. Um, let's go ahead and check. Where's my pen? We can check that off. Um, that was a big thing. Um, it took me a couple hours to do, an hour to do, um, mostly because I was figuring out SAS and Minify and finding all those tools. Um, but that's cool. That works. Work on the design of the profile page. That's next. I'm probably going to do that off live. Um, just because there's so much refreshing and stuff, it makes it a lot faster just to get into flow and deliver it. It's nothing you haven't seen before. It's just a bunch of HTML. If there's anything novel in there, I'll make sure to pull it out and I'll show you what we're doing. Um, you see me build HTML pages before. Um, we just got to get her done, and it'll just have some of that authorization. And that asset pipeline stuff, as long as it works, we don't ever have to look at it again, um, which is cool. Um, so, see you guys on Monday, hopefully. And on the next thing on our list to do, um, I'm thinking as part of the profile editing, uh, because we already have call signs and the database gives us latitude and longitude, we can use that to look up the time zone. And that'll go into that I mentioned it previously before. We want to make it time zone configurable. So now, just by getting the call sign, we can go ahead and preload that for the user. They can obviously edit it however they want, but this way, at least, we start off with a good baseline, at least something. And just by changing their location, if their call sign changes, if their license changes, we can automatically change that for them, and we'll have that ready to go, um, which is cool. And then we start getting into a little more functionality, and I think in pretty soon we're going to be ready to deploy this, and we're going to see how that goes. Get all the CI/CD pipelines, all that DevOps stuff going. I already have a vendor mostly chosen for that, and I've done some tests with them, so it looks like it's good. And we'll get CI/CD going and all that sort of fun stuff. Um, once we get to a few more things done on my MVP checklist. So with that, you will always be able to check out the source code, not there. Um, github.com/Ryan Furman/netctl, pronounced NetControl, spelled NetCTL. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, but feel free open an issue if you have any ideas. I'd love to hear it. If you find a bug, make a pull request. We'll review it together. And you also can reach me if you have any. If you want to leave me a message, I can see if I can get it to be able to be played live. I don't know. Um, Call me on the Ham Shack hotline. Just at my call sign, Kilo Quebec 4, Juliet X for India. Go ahead, call me there. And I guess stay well and have a great weekend. Thanks.